there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another incredible installment from very high above all the bombastic twits in the Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday, July 3rd, the day before Independence Day. There's so many things that are going on in our country. I mean, you pull up the news this morning, and there's you would expect to see all sorts of articles about Independence Day, but instead, what we see is how long the House of Representatives took to vote last night. Now, I don't really know why all of this is such a drawn-out, dramatic affair, but I think that that's really what it is. I stayed up late last night, hoping that maybe they would finish this small procedural vote. And that's what it was. They weren't even voting on the bill. It was just a procedural vote to get to the vote on the bill. And, I understand the gamesmanship and the strategy and, what they claim is 3D chess happening in Congress. But really, their minds should have been made up a really long time ago. Now, I'm sure that there's all sorts of arm twisting that's going on. I have no doubt that many of them really didn't want to vote for this, but instead were cajoled into it by, people at the White House or House leadership. But really, it all comes down to one choice. Either A, you're voting with the president, or B, you're voting with the Democrats. I mean, those are the two choices that you have. Now, I understand that there's a process that you go through to come to any sort of compromise. But there were a select number of representatives that they've been pretty obstinate, to tell you the truth. And there are certain provisions in the bill that they just frankly don't agree with. Thomas Massie is one of those, and I used to really like him. I really thought that he was a principled conservative, and perhaps he is. But there is compromise in any piece of legislation. Ken and I kind of talked about this yesterday on the program, that, there is something to be said for being able to have a purist view of what's happening. But the truth on the ground in the Senate chamber or the House chamber or down in Cheyenne is that you rarely get everything in its purest form. And, a lot of times conservatives need to be more amenable to incrementalism. The left has been using incrementalism for a really long time. That's how we get to all the ridiculous policies that we put up with now. How we got to Obamacare. How we got to a gigantic amount of illegal immigrants in this country. And it wasn't just Joe Biden. Illegal immigrants have been coming to this country for a really long time. Ronald Reagan himself signed an amnesty bill. So many of the situations we're dealing with right now are not the results of events that happen, this year or last year. They are things that have been building for a really long time. Two of the bigger provisions in the big beautiful bill. Oh, excuse me, it's not a beautiful bill anymore. The Senate stripped that out. It's now the Big Bill Act. Whatever. And the pettiness of the Democrats never ceases to amaze me. We have to run an amendment so we strip out the word beautiful from the title.
I think it's just a big act.
A lot of it is, and that's what I'm getting to, that a lot of this is performative. But there are two big provisions in there. One are the Trump tax cuts, and nobody is arguing that those tax cuts aren't important. And at this point, they're not tax cuts. It would be to keep the current tax rates. And if that policy were to expire, it would be the largest tax increase that Americans have seen in generations. It would be gigantic. And I don't think that any politician, even if you're a Democrat, really wants to see that because it is going to hurt your constituents.
I think the Democrats would love to see it because it happens then on Trump's watch.
Yes, well, okay, so there's two things there. You are correct that they would like to see Trump be responsible for a gigantic tax increase, but it's not really going to help them in their home districts. Oh, yeah, it'll help them with their base, tax the rich, the Zoran Mamdanis of their constituency, but it really won't help them with average Americans because most people vote with their pocketbooks. And I think if you talk to most people that voted in the last presidential election, they'll probably tell you that they're demonstrably worse off now than they were when Trump was president. And that's the reason why they voted. That's one of the reasons why President Trump gained with just about every single constituency. African Americans, Latinos, women. I mean, the list is really long, but he gained in almost all of them. And the reasons for that is the Democrats screwed up the economy. And so even at their core, Democrats really don't want to see gigantic tax rates. Now, I'm sure there are a number of radicals in the House that don't necessarily make up the whole of the Democrat Party, even though we characterize them as such. Your AOCs and your Elizabeth Warrens, Pocahontas and those types of folks. But most everybody understands the gravity of that one. Now, the other one is the debt ceiling. Now, the debt ceiling is an artificial law that was passed by Congress to prevent them from spending more money than the number that they set. But as you and I know, that too is kind of performative. That every time we bump up against the debt ceiling, there's the discussion, well, we're going to shut the government down. There are threats to shut the government down. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But in the end, the United States government cannot default on our debts. And even so, if they held off on increasing the debt ceiling and if they shut the government down, it really wouldn't shut down the entirety of the government. Mandatory spending still goes on. It's just the discretionary spending that stops. So a lot of what you're seeing on the floor of the House late into last night was it was a lot of smoke and mirrors. It was a lot of positioning. It was a lot of strategizing. But in the end, they finally passed it. Now, there's a piece this morning from Fox News, and it's entitled, House Advances Trump's Massive Agenda Bill After Fiscal Hawks Cave. All right. So, again, Agent 29, yes?
Sorry, just wanted to know if you wanted me to throw that up on the screen.
Yeah, we may as well. Put that up there. See, House advances Trump's massive agenda bill after fiscal hawks cave. Now, wait a minute. So we've heard for a couple of weeks. All right, that's probably good. We've heard for a couple of weeks how there are a number of these so-called fiscal hawks that are standing on principle. They're not going to move. They're not going to vote for this thing. Well, technically, it was just a procedural vote. But anyway, the article suggests that these so-called fiscal hawks, and I'm, without getting into the article, I'm assuming that we're talking about the Rand Pauls and the Thomas Masseys and those types of folks. But let's get to the bill. And I quote, the House of Representatives has voted to advance Donald Trump's $3.3 trillion big, beautiful bill to its final phase in Congress. And where they're at right now is in Wyoming what we would call a concurrence vote. So the House has passed a version, the Senate has passed a version and changed some things, and now it's back in the House for what's called a concurrence vote. Or in other words, do you agree with the changes that were made in the Senate? So that's where we're at right now. It's a significant victory for House Speaker Mike Johnson, though the fight is not over yet because they haven't voted on the bill yet. Lawmakers voted to proceed with debate on the mammoth-sized Trump agenda bill in the early hours of Thursday, a mechanism known as a rule vote, teeing up a final House-wide vote sometime later Thursday morning. The House adopted the rules for debate on the measure in a dramatic 219 to 213 vote, with all but moderate Brian Fitzpatrick voting to proceed. The vote had been stalled for hours since Wednesday afternoon, with 5 House Republicans poised to kill the measure before lawmakers could weigh the bill itself. Several members of the conservative House Freedom Caucus and their allies, meanwhile, appeared ready to skip the vote altogether in protest of the GOP leader's compromise bill. Both Johnson and Trump spent hours negotiating with the holdouts, apparently to some success because they passed the rule. But the process could still take hours. Democrats could still call up various procedural votes to delay the final passage, as they did when the legislation passed the House by just one vote. Plus, the bill itself could still face opposition from moderates and more conservative members. So anyway, this isn't a vote on the bill. It was a vote on a procedural move. And those folks who were, before yesterday, adamantly opposed to this thing, finally acquiesced, and they voted for the procedure. Now, that doesn't mean that they'll vote for the final bill. That doesn't mean that there'll be a yes on the concurrence vote. It just simply means that we've teed up the bill for another vote today. And so, and here's the thing. We see this a lot in our legislature that, Agent 29 may vote for a bill just to have the discussion. You hear that argument a lot when he fully intends to vote against it, on third reading or first reading or whatever. On third reading is when this most likely happens, or most of the time. So there's a lot of that goes on. Yeah, I'm not going to vote for the bill in the end, but let's go ahead and have the discussion anyway. And I don't really see that big of a problem with that. Agent 29?
No, that's actually to a benefit, because a lot of times you force people to get up and you don't force them to get up and say anything, but people are willing to get up and say things that you can later use
against them.
In some sort of a podcast or something.
Yeah, something like that. But anyway, so that's where we're at with the big, beautiful bill. And we'll find out what happens today. But I have to tell you, the entire performance is, it's pretty disappointing if you ask me. I was not happy with a lot of the provisions that came out of the House of Representatives. And, the Senate stripped out a lot of the really good stuff, like all of the NFA items. Those were stripped out. So, the ban on short barrel rifles is still there, and all of the restrictions on buying a suppressor, those are still in. Those are not in the bill. The Senate parliamentarian, which, interestingly enough, I don't know why Republicans continue to go along with things that the Democrats set up. The Senate parliamentarian was a position that was created by Harry Reid, dingy Harry Reid, when he was the Senate Majority Leader. It's not really a position that's been there for a really long time. Well, it's that Senate parliamentarian that stripped out a lot of the provisions in the bill. So, there's a lot of back and forth, a lot of performance and acting here.
Yeah, that position, the parliamentarian position, that is characteristic. It's kind of symbolic of the entire swamp.
Yes.
This is an unelected person, a staffer.
Yes.
Wielding the power that ought to be reserved for those who have been elected. In Wyoming, you might call them a district judge.
You might call them a district judge. But let me see if I can give you a Wyoming example. This would be akin to somebody from LSO, Matt Obrecht, for example, saying, you can't do this to the members of the House of Representatives, and them actually going along with it. It's ridiculous. It's not something that would really happen.
Well, you say it's ridiculous, but it actually does happen behind the scenes. The LSO is able to convince a lot of people to just drop it.
Well, see, and that's different, though. Yeah. Convincing them to drop it is a different critter altogether than saying you will drop it. And I think that's the point here. But we're going to see what happens with the big, beautiful bill. And, I think that anytime you have a big piece of legislation like this, there's going to be compromise. And that's how things get passed. And even though as conservatives, we really don't like some of the compromises, we talked about this at length yesterday on the topic of abortion. Even though we don't like those things, sometimes you don't have to be happy with it. You don't necessarily have to accept it. But to move a measure forward, you take the good along with the bad. So anyway, that's where we're at with that bill. Now, on today's program, at the top of the next hour, we've got an interview with Karen Weber. Karen's been in the middle of all of this green energy stuff in southeastern Wyoming, wind, solar, and she's got her fingers on the pulse of what's happening there. So we're going to talk to Karen Weber at the top of the hour. So make sure that you stay tuned for that. Let's hear other stuff. Well, I mean, it's the day before Independence Day, so I've got a couple of interesting stories about that. But let's continue with the discussion. There's an opinion piece by Grover Nordquist, or Norquist is his name. There's no D in his name, and it's entitled "Trump's Big Beautiful Bill and Its Permanent Tax Cut Will Change the World." Now, if you're not familiar with who Grover Norquist, he's the head of Americans for Tax Reform. He's been one of the chief proponents of cutting taxes in America for a very, very long time. And anytime you're talking about tax cuts, somewhere you'll find Grover sneaking around. And he's not, he's not in his garbage can or anything, but he's a prominent figure in any sort of tax discussion. So here's what he says, and I found this piece on Fox News this morning. Quote, "The Big Beautiful Bill is the capstone of years of work to create a pro-growth tax policy that will make America's economy so strong we will leave Europe in the dust and convince China that they cannot compete with us militarily or economically." So stop right there. Why are tax cuts pro-growth? Now, we talk a lot about leaving more money in people's pockets, but what does it really mean? What are the economic effects of cutting taxes? Well, it's the Laffer curve. That it's kind of paradoxical that if you cut taxes, first thing that you will find is that your revenue will increase. So you're decreasing the amount of money you're taking from people, and the revenues coming from other sources will actually increase. So there's a great story by a guy. I think he was the mayor of Cheyenne, and he was testifying in front of the Revenue Committee. And he said, it's a fascinating thing. When our sales tax expired, our revenue at the city went up. And, the question for everybody, or the statement for everybody on the committee was, well, why don't you just kind of leave it that way? Well, no, we're going to go for this tax again. You see, bureaucrats, they don't quite understand how lowering taxes actually increases the revenue coming from business. And the reason for that is simple. When you lessen the tax burden and the regulatory burden on private business, they are allowed to expand. And it is the nature of private business that if you have more money and you're freer to operate, you will expand. It's when you increase the tax burden on businesses that they decide to, decrease the amount of employees that they have. They may put off plans to expand until the tax environment is more suitable to expansion of their business. I mean, everything is a business decision, whether it's, building an addition on, or increasing your inventory, or increasing the number of people you have on your staff. If you have more money in your pocket, you're more likely to do that and thus grow your business. And it happens across the entirety of the economy. If government gets the heck out of the way of the free market, it will grow and it will expand. I mean, it's an economic law. But Norquist continues. "The big bill provides lower tax rates for all, permanent, immediate expensing of business investment, tax simplification, America competing in the world economy with lower taxes." So that permanent part is really important, because any responsible business owner doesn't act if they are uncertain of what's going to happen next year. If you can't make decisions based on what's coming in the future, you're just not going to make that decision. That wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't expand your business if there was a possibility of the next year your taxes being jacked through the ceiling. That doesn't make any sense. You wouldn't do that. But if you provide certainty to business owners, that is, the tax rates are going to remain the same for however many years in the future or permanently, well, that gives them an incentive to expand, and business owners will, because, I mean, we're all capitalists. Well, allegedly we're all capitalists, except for Zoran Mondani. And we all like to make money. And the way that you make money is that you expand your business. And, that's just a simple economic rule. The Big Beautiful Bill makes all the temporary parts of the original Trump tax cuts permanent. The doubling of the child tax credit and standard deduction, the lower across-the-board personal income tax rates for all Americans, and the powerful pro-growth immediate business expensing provisions. In other words, if a business can write off expenses, of course they're going to continue to expand their business, right? If I can write off all of the, buying a new piece of equipment or a new microphone or a new board for Agent 29 to operate, and I can expense it off my taxes, heck yeah, we're going to do that. There would be no reason why I wouldn't. And if we purchase that new board, well, then that's one more piece of equipment that the company we get all of our products from gets to sell. And then they can hire more people and they can build more boards. I mean, it's really just a big domino effect is what it is. Now, Democrats will not be able to claw back such widespread and successful tax reductions. Republicans will not have to buy extensions of tax rate reductions as they did defending the previous Bush-era tax rate reductions. Following the Trump 2017 tax cuts, with its temporary expensing provisions, Americans for Tax Reform compiled 1,200 testimonials and newspaper reports documenting new investment and higher wages and benefits. The stories flowed from all 50 states. And let me just give you a really common sense one. The most regressive tax that you can possibly levy on somebody is twofold. There are two of them. The first one is a sales tax. And the reason I call these regressive is that they affect those people with lower incomes proportionately more than those folks with higher incomes. So, for example, if you're the guy that makes $100,000 a year and you're paying 1% or 2% higher sales tax on everything you buy, that's probably not going to affect you a whole heck of a lot. I mean, at the end of the year, you're probably talking about a big chunk of change, but proportionally, not really that big a deal. But if you are the person that makes $25,000 a year, that 1 or 2% affects your bottom line way more than it does to the guy that has $100,000 every year coming in. And we're talking about the people that are, and sometimes I still have to do this. You go through all your change in the house and say, well, I need a couple hundred extra bucks. Honey, get the change jar. I mean, those type of folks, and again, sometimes I'm in that category as well, get affected by increased taxes on sales tax way more than anybody else. The other one is taxes on your payroll. So we automatically deduct a significant percentage of your paycheck every single time that you get paid. And a couple of those places is in tips and in overtime. The reason why people work overtime is, generally speaking, they get paid at a higher rate. Well, the way our system was set up prior to, or is set up now, I guess, prior to the big, beautiful bill, is that you are taxed at a higher rate for overtime. And so really, when you do the math, yeah, you make a little bit of extra money on your overtime, but, in the end, you kind of get bit. So right now, we take a big chunk of that on overtime and tips.
Kind of depends on where you're at, where the brackets are.
Sure,
The last
absolutely.
several years that I was working in construction, I refused to work any overtime because I peaked out at about 32 hours a week.
Mhm.
If I went over that, I'd have to work like 55 hours to break even again because I went into a higher bracket. It was just right in that uncomfortable spot. It's another example of how government and regulation and the things that they do can dampen enthusiasm.
Sure. And your business is kind of interesting, Ken. And let's just talk about that for just a second. If you don't know, Agent 29 is a brilliant carpenter. You'll never hear him say that, but I'm saying it. I mean, he's an incredible carpenter. And if the tax environment were perfect for him, I shouldn't say perfect, it was favorable for him, he might very well open up a cabinet making business or a custom carpentry shop.
I did that for a big chunk of my life.
See, there you go.
Yeah. And the truth became that, and it wasn't necessarily related to that, but there's so much hassle in running a business.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you can make more money that way.
Yeah.
You're multiplying the labor. But at some point, money's not the main object anymore.
Yeah, you want to produce somebody's show.
You want to go fishing.
Yeah, and produce somebody's show. Anyway, my point is if the tax environment were favorable to Ken, he may very well likely hire an apprentice, or maybe he's going to hire another carpenter because he can make more money. But the problem is when you have higher taxes, there's no incentive for him to do that. You just heard Agent 29 say, Well, he stopped working at 32 hours because anything more than that put him in a higher tax bracket. Now, let's talk about the other folks that work jobs that are mainly based on tips. Those are the people that are typically at the lower part of the economic spectrum. Waitresses, restaurant workers, a hairstylist might be in that category. Though I would argue that if you're a talented hairstylist like the lovely Christine, you can make a heck of a lot of money. But those people who live off of tips tend to be at the lower end of the economic spectrum. And so if you have increased taxes, it affects those folks proportionately more. Now, because they generally work on a cash basis, that money gets injected directly into the economy, right? So you take your tips for the night, and then you go directly to the grocery store, and it's a direct influx of money into the economy without the burden of excess taxes on top of that income. And so the big beautiful bill removes those taxes on tips and therefore increases the amount of money that's going into the economy. I mean, it makes perfect sense when you think about it. If you've got more cash in your pocket, you spend more money.
Yeah, there's also the aspect of when taxes are higher, people are more likely to try to evade taxes.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
liable to go through all sorts of convoluted ways of covering up whatever they make. It's cumbersome. It's a little bit like the speed limits. When the speed limit was 55, I did everything I could to avoid the law. I drove as fast as I wanted to. That was a long time ago. So
How many
I'm
tickets did you pay?
several.
Yeah, see, there
Yeah.
you
How many tickets did I deserve?
go. Way more.
Yeah. And then when they moved it up, I can't remember where they moved it, 65 or 70 or something. Now it's 80.
Yeah, on
Now,
most interstates.
yeah, and I don't speed.
Well, no, you have no need to.
Yeah, it's I'll go ahead and be compliant. My point is that if the tax burden is relatively light, it's it's just a part of doing business. It's not a big deal. You don't have to go through all the convoluted motions to try to find a way around it. You don't have to move part of your business over here and part over here and paying attention to the checkerboard of tax laws. You just simply do it, and things move along more quickly.
Now, you bring up an interesting point that if the tax rates are fair, and I understand that fair is kind of a nebulous term, but if they are fair and reasonable, and we would have to have a discussion of what that means, business owners and private individuals will gladly pay their taxes in that it's not overburdensome and everybody likes to have nice smooth roads to drive on. If you don't like that, you can always move to Gillette. Their roads really suck. But everybody likes nice smooth roads. Police, it's kind of handy to have those folks around. Fire departments, and we like to live in a nice community. So everybody understands that those things are nice to have, and if taxes are reasonable, absolutely, people will pay them. The problem is when they become overburdensome, is what you get what Ken was describing. That there's all sorts of ways to get around them, and here's another thing too. There's a lot of tax loopholes they're in our tax code that really need to be sewn up. In Wyoming, we call them deductions, and there are a ton of deductions in Wyoming, but we do that to increase business. So, for example, there's a number of things that are not taxed. So one of those is groceries. Okay, we don't tax groceries or medicine in Wyoming, but there are other things like services that we don't tax. Hairstylists aren't taxed. Lawn care is not taxed. Advertising is not taxed. And why is that? Because those are things that inject money directly into the economy. So, for example, advertising. If one of my clients says, I want to double the amount of advertising I do on your show, well, that helps him out. That furthers his business. It furthers my business. And thus, it increases the amount of money eventually that ends up at the state. Right? There's no reason to take that money out on the front end because logically, you'll probably end up with more money on the back end.
Yeah, we just passed a bill here in Wyoming to increase the deduction to 75,000 for personal equipment. If you go out and own equipment and use it in a business, you used to have to pay tax on that equipment all the time.
Yeah, it was absolutely
and
ridiculous.
You still do over a certain point. And we did some other things that way too. And the point is we're just trying to spur the economy a little bit.
Exactly right. And that's what the majority of the big, beautiful bill will do. Now, admittedly, the darn thing's right at 1,000 pages. And so there's a lot of other things in there. But the taxes, in my mind, probably one of the better things. So when we come back, I'm going to give you kind of the Democrats' view of this whole thing, and it is as crazy as you would imagine. We'll do that when we come back, and then at the top of the hour, we're going to talk to Karen Weber, and we'll talk about all sorts of clean energy, so-called, it's all bull crap, really. But we'll do that when we come back.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Politics Live. I'm your host, David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. A record that, frankly, nobody in the mainstream media can even come close to because, they don't try. And a lot of politicians don't try either, which, by the way, kind of brings up an interesting topic. I sort of stirred up a hornet's nest yesterday on the podcast, and if you haven't listened to it, you need to go check it out. It was all about how Senator Bo Biteman went to Florida and said that, we want nuclear waste in Wyoming. And, most people don't. In fact, I haven't talked to a single person that thinks that is a fantastic idea. But anyway, on the podcast, I played for you what he said. And it is, it's pretty shocking. At one point, he says, the most people who are against this, the general public, they don't know anything. Nope, you don't know anything, and that's why you're opposing it. Also, he said that in Wyoming, we want to mine the uranium, use the uranium, and, quote, put it back in the ground. It's pretty shocking audio, and if you missed it, you should definitely go back and listen to the podcast. And I've got, let's see here, I've got a couple of sound bites. Let's go ahead and play one of them. Play cut number 5 for me.
We see Wyoming as the complete fuel cycle. We want to do we don't want to just mine it, ship it out of the state and forget about it. We want the whole value chain, everything, start to finish, from when we pull it out of the ground, whole fuel process, and then when we put it back in the ground, possibly.
Now, does that sound like something you want? Does that something that you voted for? The truth is, no. I mean, not at all. In fact, the Wyoming legislature has voted this down several times in the past. And in last session, there were actually 2 bills. There was House Bill 16 that didn't even make it. That was not even. I mean, and there's a big controversy around that one. It was kind of railroaded through the Minerals Committee. It was brought up at the last minute, and just kind of shady. But that one didn't even get a hearing in the Minerals. Oh, it did get a hearing, but they didn't vote for it. And then there was Senate File 186. I think that one passed the Senate, and that one was a little bit different. It would have just made it easier to set up used fuel storage in Wyoming. The difference was the fuel had to be generated in Wyoming. So, I mean, kind of an interesting one there. So anyway, go back and listen to the podcast. It's got a huge amount of response already. So anyway, go check it out if you haven't listened to it yet. Coming up at the top of the hour, we've got an interview with Karen Weber. Karen has been right in the middle of all this wind, solar, so-called green energy stuff. And so we're going to talk to her at the top of the hour. Should be a pretty interesting conversation. But I want to give you some of the reaction to the big, beautiful bill that's coming from the Democrats. And of course, one of the likely suspects, suspect works. But one of the people who constantly is number one on the Democrats that, well, frankly, they're going to be opposed to just about anything, is Jamie Raskin. And go ahead, let's see here. Let's go ahead and watch this video. It's actually pretty crazy. And there's something I want you to notice in the video, but we'll go ahead and watch it, and I'll pause it, hopefully at the right time. Here we go.
Do you think the political consequences will show up for your members of the House who vote for this bill, particularly those, say, the ones in the swing districts, the ones like Derek Van Orden in Wisconsin, who's got a lot of Medicaid recipients and rural hospitals in his district?
Yes, because the pain will start to be felt immediately as millions of people are thrown off.
Okay, so hold on just a second. Don't switch this off. I want you to look at this. Look at the framed picture to his left. It says, "I need the money." What do you suppose that one's about? And then look at the poster that's right behind him. Democracy Summer. What do you think that those are about? And then an interesting sign down on his left, or I guess to the left of the screen, it appears to be a street sign, and it says Delphia, as in Delphi, as in, Delphi was where the oracle was in, was it the Iliad and the Odyssey? But anyway, pretty crazy place.
Maybe it's just the end of Philadelphia.
Maybe. Could be the end of Philadelphia. Don't know. But interesting pictures he's got in the background. Let's go ahead and play it.
Off of Medicaid, off Medicare in different ways, the Affordable Care Act, and as people lose their SNAP benefits. And what is it for? They can't say it's for deficit reduction or debt reduction. They're adding trillions of dollars to the debt. It's all to give money to the very richest people in the society who run the Republican Party, and they will continue this authoritarian program. I mean, authoritarianism is always involved in class war of the rich against the rest of society.
Yeah.
And so they're acting.
Okay. All right. So Jamie Raskin says that the only thing this big, beautiful bill is doing is creating class warfare. Yeah, that's, and it's, the more desperate the Democrats become, the more crazy their arguments are, that it always boils down for them to class warfare, rich versus poor, powerful versus powerless. And that's the dynamic that the Democrats always use. And, the fascinating thing about it is they haven't picked up on the fact that all their references to Hitler and authoritarianism and and all of those, they haven't figured out that none of that has worked. But when that's the only argument that you've got left in the bag, which really, when it comes to Donald Trump, that is the only thing that they have left, in their tank. So why wouldn't they go to it? I mean, obviously they would. So, I mean, that gives you just kind of a sense of where the Democrats are at on this. And it's truly infuriating. I mean, Ken, did you have any idea? I mean, did you even think that they would have any other argument other than this?
Nope. I try not to guess ahead.
Fair enough. All right, so let's hear. Moving on before we get to Karen Weber. All right, so we've got another federal judge. And, it was just last week that the Supreme Court struck down all of this nationwide injunctions. But now we have another federal judge who's pretty much ignoring the Supreme Court and decided to shield 500,000 people from Trump's immigration crackdown. So ask yourself, how can a lower court ignore a higher court? Not supposed to be able to do that. But it's an example of how lawless our culture has become.
They call it local control.
Yes, local control. In Wyoming, the way that you hear this is, well, your cities and your counties, they should be able to tell you where you can carry a firearm. It's when they feel safe. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It is completely detached from any sort of law. But here's what the Blaze says about this. Quote, another district judge sought to block the Trump administration's mass deportation efforts by preventing the Department of Homeland Security from stripping temporary protected status from over 500,000 immigrants, despite the administration's recent Supreme Court victory. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem announced Friday that the agency would end TPS, which is temporary protected status, for Haiti on September 2nd, requiring more than 500,000 Haitian nationals in the U.S. to return to their home country. TPS was originally provided to Haitian nationals in 2010, and the federal government executed numerous redesignations, extending the program through the Biden administration. But the Trump administration said, no, we're not going to do that, and there is no more temporary protected status, and we're going to send you packing. Well, a federal judge, Ira Melman with the Federation for American Immigration Reform, told the Blaze, the TPS is designed to protect people from extraordinary and temporary conditions, preventing the return of the country's nationals. So there's something happening in their home country that prevents them from returning. Maybe they're going to be killed when they enter the country, or some other effect that really does prevent them from returning. Well, on Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Brian Cogan in Brooklyn attempted to block the Trump administration's termination of that program for Haitian nationals. He claimed that Kristi Noem, quote, cannot reconsider Haiti's TPS designation in a way that takes effect before February 3rd of 2026, the expiration of the most previous extension. Quote, plaintiffs are likely to, and indeed do, succeed on the merits. Secretary Noem's partial response was in excess of her authority and thus unlawful. Well, the Supreme Court has said that a district judge cannot overrule or cannot issue a nationwide injunction. In fact, they said, from their opinion, universal injunctions likely exceed the equitable authority that Congress has given to the federal courts. My friends, we are living in a lawless society. And I mean, when we have federal judges, people who are bound to uphold the law and are bound to it, just deciding ad hoc on their own to just decide whatever they want to decide. I mean, it's absolutely and completely lawless.
Look at the immigration issue. You've got sanctuary states, sanctuary cities. They've just arbitrarily said, okay, this is the law, but we're going to ignore it.
Exactly right.
It's kind of like, let's just say a patrolman in the governor's office sees a guy stroll into the ladies' room. I don't like that law.
Well, and that's a great example. That happened. We talked about it yesterday briefly on the program, but whether you agree or not with the law that the legislature passed and that became Wyoming law, that you have to use the correct bathroom. By correct, I mean the one that corresponds to your actual sex and gender. or your actual gender. And it basically says if you're a woman, you got to use the women's room. If you're a man, you got to use the men's room. Well, a so-called transgender person decided that they were going to use the women's room. A man, by the way, decided to use the women's room right by the governor's office. So here's what happened. He walks by the governor's office, and right there is where the highway patrol hangs out. That's where their little command station is. Walks right past them and walks right into the women's restroom. And the patrolman and the governor do absolutely nothing about it, just simply because, they don't like those laws.
Now, to be fair, they would have been playing right into his hand if he wanted to get arrested. He wanted to have a big to-do and whatnot. And yet, show me another law that you can flaunt right in front of a peace officer, and they just completely ignore you.
Exactly right. It's not a cop's job to decide which laws he's going to enforce and which ones he's not going to enforce. I mean, it's kind of their job to enforce all the laws. But yet another case where we're not exactly living in a lawful society. And, I'm looking at the sound bites here, Agent 29, and I missed a good one that I wanted to play. And since we've got about 15 minutes before Karen Weber, let's go ahead and play cut number one. This is Bill Maher explaining how screwed up the Democrats are. Take a listen.
Of who Democrats are supporting was a topic when you were on Real Time with Bill Maher. And he wasn't talking about this in particular. He was talking about Hamas, the anti-Israel protests. Let me just play a little bit about what he said in terms of the Democrats seeming to be going down the wrong road here. Listen to this.
Here is the dilemma for Democrats. Their young people, their key constituency, not only don't like their own civilization, they like the wrong one. They actually think Hamas is a liberation movement. They chant for the Houthis. They're chanting, "We will honor our martyrs" at Yale. They're looking for love in all the wrong countries. At an AOC Bernie Sanders rally in Idaho last month, someone threw a Palestinian flag over an American flag, and the crowd erupted in approval. What should have happened after that is one of the adults on stage should have told their young, loyal followers, this is not a symbol of freedom. This is. If the thought leaders in the Democratic Party keep encouraging and not rebuking the idea that America is cringe and the people who run Gaza are great, the Democrats are doomed. Alyssa Slotkin's right. Liberals are weak and woke, especially the white ones, and they indulge all sorts of nonsense from their kids. So talk to your children and remind them, you don't really want to live like your heroes in Hamas. All the you do all day, it was all made in America. Your smartphone, your Grubhub, your freedom to bitch about America, that's all American stuff. You tell your phone you want a milkshake and a guy brings it to your house. Please, you couldn't survive a week living in Intifadaville.
So the suggestion from him that
all right, so exactly right. All of the outrage that we're hearing from the left, I mean, it's all manufactured. And the vast majority of it really doesn't have any basis in reality. I mean, it's all made up stuff, and it's all the same arguments over and over and over again.
So we're kind of on a little bit of a Bill Maher kick lately.
Yeah, we are.
I found a soundbite from him. He had a guest on who is a West Point graduate, happens to be black. His name is Wesley Hunt.
Yes.
If you'd be interested, I'd like to play that and get your reaction.
Yeah,
I'll
let's
play
hear it.
a little game here, as we like to do here.
Trump is putting the Robert E. Lee name back on buildings. I mean, are you down with that?
So when I was at West Point, I actually lived in Robert E. Lee Barracks when I was there. And as I said,
Robert E. Lee went to West Point.
Yes, he did. That's why the barracks is named after him. My brother, sister, and I are matriculated through West Point. We all graduated. And I'll never forget walking under the threshold of Robert E. Lee Barracks and think to myself, damn, this is one hell of a country. Because only in America can someone like me walk into a building named after a Confederate general and then be a successful West Point graduate. If we start changing the names on buildings, then every single building would be named Jesus Christ based on perfection. I bring that up because I want to talk about the progress, and the idea of us changing names on buildings actually doesn't harken us back to times where they weren't as good.
And statues
And how
too?
can we not? Oh, I am, my wife is, I've been black my whole life.
Yes.
So far, still. my wife is white, and we have 3 biracial children, and I cannot wait to show them and take them to places that wasn't always the case. There was a time when your mother and daddy could not be married. My children are going to have the opportunity to be second lining down in New Orleans, and then my wife is from Iowa. They'll be on the farm with their grandfather in Iowa. That is America, and I do not want to take down these statues and change the names of these buildings because they're a reminder of what was, and if we don't remember it, we are doomed to repeat it.
Boom, exactly right. See, history is neither good nor bad. It just is. And the reason why we study it is so that we don't repeat the mistakes that we did in the past, and that, you know, we hopefully change and we do things better. And, you know, first, one of the reasons why you see Robert E. Lee everywhere is, one, he was a pretty great general. I mean, yeah, he was the general for the American South, but he also did a whole bunch of other great stuff.
Just a great man.
Well, really, yeah. I mean, he did. One of the reasons you see Robert E. Lee statues at a lot of universities is he spent the rest of his life after the Civil War working on education. And I think his point in the soundbite that you played is we need to be able to, let me put it this way. Has America done some really, really bad stuff? Absolutely. There is no question. We've done some stuff that is really bad. But have we done some things that are very, very good? Yes, we have. And the mistakes that we make in the past, we as a culture, as a country, have decided that we're going to correct them. We're not like other countries where we continue to perpetrate the really horrible stuff we did in the past. We fix it, and then we move on. And if we destroy those statues and names of buildings, and first of all, I think that's absolutely stupid. It's performative. It doesn't do anything to the narrative. But if we do that, it removes another way that we can look at our past and say, you know, in that situation, what we did was wrong, and we shouldn't do that again. It allows us to remember the things that we did.
Would you have changed the name of the USS Harvey Milk?
Absolutely, I would have. I don't want a ship named after a political activist who happened to be gay. The reason why we name ships the way that we do is to honor great people in our military and to honor our states. Even though the first USS Wyoming, well, that was built by some private people, and it really wasn't that great of a ship because it sank with all hands on board.
That was just the SS Wyoming.
Yeah. But it's the reason why we have ships named the way that we do is to honor great Americans. The USS George Washington, the USS Enterprise. That's another story all in and of itself. But normally we name ships after things that we want to remember, great things that happened in our nation.
I think what I liked about this comment from Mr. Hunt was that he says we want to have the memorials to mistakes, and that's kind of what you're saying.
Absolutely.
But we don't hear that in this discussion ever. It's like we just, oh, that's a blemish, so we're just going to cover that up. We're not going to talk about that anymore. We're going to pretend it never existed. And if you pretend something it never existed, you don't learn from it. Obviously, we're saying the same thing he did.
Exactly. But, I mean, it is so important that we learn from history. And there's a lot of things that we're doing right now that are the same thing that we've done in the past. Let me give you a great example of that. Let's see here. Play cut number 2 for me. This is Mom Donnie again.
Go further toward the Vienna model. We'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership.
Oh.
We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good.
So we're going to create communes.
I wonder how the Pilgrims would react to that.
I wonder.
After they'd been here for a little while.
What about, I don't know. What about the commune in like 1800s that was started in, I think it was it Indiana? New Harmony is what it was called. Yeah, it pretty much failed and a whole bunch of people died. But yet here we are in New York trying socialism again, as if it were something great. You know, maybe we just didn't do it right in the past. Maybe they just didn't get it right the last time communism was tried. But this time we'll get it right, which has been the mantra of every communist that's ever tried this. You got another soundbite?
Yeah, just like the way this thing is set when folks, we're getting ready to go to a different system that we have to use when we do an interview, and it kind of messes with things.
And it taxes Agent 29 over here.
We're going to learn how to do that, so hold on just a second.
All right.
Okay, what happens is I have to mute something that cuts everything off in this case, and that's not comfortable. But anyway, what other sound bite did you want?
So play cut number 3 for me.
What the purpose is about this entire project, it's not simply to raise class consciousness, but to win socialism. And obviously raising class consciousness is a critical part of that. But making sure that we have candidates that both understand that and are willing to put that forward at every which moment that they have, at every which opportunity that they are given. We have to continue to elect more socialists. And we have to ensure that we are unapologetic about our socialism.
Unapologetic about our socialism. We have to elect more socialists. And if you'll notice, like, he mentions the same thing that you heard from Jamie Raskin, that it is all class warfare. It's the rich versus the poor, the powerful versus the powerless. I mean, it's the same thing that all these Democrats argue. And honestly, it's the same argument we've heard for well over 150 years. Same thing that Karl Marx said. But yet, here we are doing the exact same thing in New York. I mean, it's absolute lunacy is what it is. Well, anyway, I I could play you way more sound bites of Mom Donnie, and well, you know what? We're going to save that one for tomorrow.
I've got another sound bite if you just want to fill a minute or two before we go to Karen. Let's see. I got to pick a fun one. Okay, I've got one other one, but this one is just a fun one. Okay, this is Walter Matthau.
Oh, yeah. Okay, great.
On Johnny Carson.
So things are much better now.
Oh, God, yeah. I was in a mall.
So he's talking about having been in the hospital.
Okay.
This room with another fellow who said to there was a very cold-looking nurse, very stern. And he said to her, she said, well, what are you going to have for breakfast? And he said, could I have, some orange juice, but you know the little cups they use for the urine specimen? He says, could you empty one of those out and put the orange juice in that cup? He says, because when I like to smell a little urine, he says, and she is looking at him. When I drink the orange, he says, and could you let me have 2 eggs? I like them runny. Like, don't maybe put them on the grill maybe for 4, maybe 3 seconds the most. And don't use butter. Use Crisco. Or if you have some Pennzoil. And this nurse is staring at him. He says, and give me some bacon. Some bacon, I want it raw if possible. I want raw bacon, and I want coffee left over from last week. She says, what are you talking about? I can't serve you a breakfast like that. He says, well, you did yesterday.
I love Walter Matthau. Grumpy old man. Love it.
I just, we're talking about socialism and that sort of thing, and it just kind of put me in that mood.
Well, that's what you get with socialism. Everybody is going to be equal. It's just some aren't going to be as equal as others. So let's go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we're going to talk to Karen Weber. Windmills, solar panels, and this green energy scam. So we'll do that in just a second. But first, an absolutely outrageous profit timeout. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, What that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada. Straight to hell. Iceland. France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy state politics is only going to get stronger. This program is going to continue to expand from every corner of this state to every state in this nation. It's Cowboy state politics. Welcome back to the program, my friends. I'm joined on the program by Karen Weber. Karen has been right in the middle of all of this so-called clean energy, windmills, solar panels, all that sort of stuff. So I thought we'd have her on the program and just see what all the details are on it. So first, Karen, welcome to Cowboy State Politics.
Well, I'm glad to be here, David. Thank you for inviting me.
Of course. Well, first question everybody gets on the show is why don't you just tell my audience about yourself and let's tell us everything you've been up to.
Okay. So my background, I have about 40 years, mostly in acute healthcare. I'm a registered nurse, and I do have a master's of business administration from Colorado State University. In the last bit of my career, I worked as a nationwide consultant to acute care hospitals and systems. And basically what they would like for me to do is come in and identify the real problems, the things that have been festering for a long time, and to resolve them to everybody's satisfaction. So what this really requires in a person is a lot of critical thinking, strategic thinking, being able to identify the opportunities, how to unravel the knot and put it all back together again with a lot of persistence, which is why I am a perfect fit for what I've been doing with this really onerous green energy journey that I've been on for the last few years.
All right, so why don't we talk about that for just a minute? I mean, like this so-called renewable energy, green energy stuff is a big topic in the state. And I mean, everything from windmills, solar panels, I wouldn't characterize nuclear power as green, but it's certainly in the same discussion. And as I understand it, in southeast Wyoming, there's a bit of a controversy brewing about windmills. What's going on there?
Well, we have a company by the name of Next Era who is proposing a project between Goshen County and Platte County. One of the things that is important to know is that they've had some experience in Wyoming before it turns out that they never, as an example, never got some Eagle permits or federal permits. And so after a number of years, finally, this case went all the way to the Department of Justice, and they were fined $8 million.
Whoa.
But now yeah, and they're on probation right now, and they have many other scandals, many, for election bribery. Let's see, federal election, well, anyway, tampering with many things.
Okay.
Most recently, here in Goshen and Platte, they made a proposal to county commissioners to meet with them privately, including the planner. And that, of course, is against Robert rules. I'm guessing they know that, but they did it anyway. And so
did they have a quorum of, hold on, I don't mean to interrupt you, but did they have a quorum of commissioners there?
Well, they were just bringing it to the meeting. I was sitting in on the meeting, and they brought it in, and they said, one of the commissioners said that he was approached directly by NextEra, and they wanted to have a private meeting.
That's ridiculous.
Well, but this is the tactics. And so they have lots and lots of scandals in their background. If you, go ahead and take a quick look at their background, you'll find that there are, many violations for many things in their background. And so that's what's going on. People are becoming aware of what goes on. The first thing any of these companies do, including NextEra, is they offer a lot of money.
Sure.
And they also lie. And let me give you an example. I was in a county commissioner meeting, and another wind company came in, and the county, they said that they had a potential lease, and that, they just haven't finalized it yet. They want to protect the owner's privacy, okay? And then the commissioner asked them directly, are you going about the county soliciting and going door to door? And three of them, no, we're not doing that. Interestingly, just a day or so later, I get a call from my neighbor that this particular company was at his house waving a check at him. Would you like to have a wind farm on your property? And then another neighbor I found out did that. Well, anyway, these are the tactics. They lie. They all lie.
Okay,
they lie. They make
right.
the promise of money and they lie.
All right, so let me just play devil's advocate with you here, just for a second. I've done a lot of work with permitting for oil and gas companies through the Bureau of Land Management, and if you want to put a pipeline through or drill a well on somebody's property, well, you've got to strike an agreement with them, and a lot of those are called surface use agreements, or if you're going to drill the well on their property and they own the mineral rights, well, then you're going to purchase the rights to operate on their property. And I mean, that's common practice, right? I mean, if I strike a deal with somebody that, I want to put a road through their property, and they say, well, you're going to pay me this amount of money, and I do that, is there anything wrong with that?
No, the second thing they talk about is private property rights, and I'm a total proponent for that. However, when one person's private property rights begin to affect other people's property rights, one person's rights do not imply, as a natural consequence, the right to infringe on someone else's private property rights. And it is extremely well known, although these companies will never talk about, the harms that are done to neighboring landowners and roads and all of that sort of thing. But that is an actual fact. A friend of mine recently went up to South Dakota to talk with a landowner that actually put wind towers up. And when the company came in, they made a lot of promises that they did not keep. And on their way out, they picked up all the gravel, and they had already ruined one of their bridges. And now the county's on the hook. And so counties need to be very aware of what is really going on. It's just not really a matter of private property rights. It is an issue of national security, energy policy. It's actually an attack on agriculture. And it comes down to, food security in the end. Goshen County itself happens to be one of the, it is, if not the top, it is the top food producer in the state of Wyoming. And basically, if they would have their way, they would change our way of life from being agricultural to being industrial. So the question for all the counties to say to themselves is, who do you want to be? Do you want to be industrial, or do you want to retain your culture, your heritage, and have a future for your family? Nobody wants to live next to this stuff. It's not healthy, and it's money. That's it.
Well, I think that we like in Wyoming, I mean, we're a very pro-business state, and certainly we don't want to discourage, any private business. But on the other hand, as you correctly point out, you have to respect everybody else's rights. And I've got quite a few friends that live in Converse County, and in some places you can pull up on a ranch and the entire skyline all the way around is nothing but windmills. Well, that's a result of, a windmill company striking a bargain with your neighbor and saying, hey, we're going to put up a windmill. And while I would agree that, we do need to respect the property rights of other, landowners. I mean, how do we, I guess what I'm asking you to do for me is strike, where's the balance between, industrial development, business development, and respecting the rights of individual property owners? Because there's got to be a line somewhere. Where is that?
It's at the fence line. When somebody else's opportunity for a great deal of money impacts it becomes a threat to my losing productivity, losing, water through evaporation, heating up my pastures so that I don't have as much grass. And I could go on and on. How about the threat of fire? You name it. This industrial is different. It's not like it affects everybody. And so it happens at the fence line. I shouldn't have to be subject to shadow flicker. How about the vibration, the constant vibration, and what that does to my physical health? Recently, a group of people went over to Medicine Bow to take a tour of those wind towers over there, and a number of people got headaches. How would you like to live next to that? But if you want the money bad enough, okay, and this is really a spiritual battle. It's a morality issue. If you're willing to trample on other people's property rights to get money, I mean, that's a decision you have to make. But not everybody's willing to allow that to happen. And that's why the people are beginning to become educated and find their voice. And that is what's going on in southeastern Wyoming.
All right, well, let's talk about that for just a second. I mean, obviously, there's a big controversy. I mean, I've seen it, in several different newspapers, media outlets, where landowners are, protesting this development. So, can you characterize for me what have local landowners been doing? I mean, they've been going to the county commissioners. Have there been public meetings? Just give us a sense of, the temperature surrounding all these windmills. I mean, what's been happening?
Well, there's been a lot of talk, and it's a matter of people doing a lot of research to find out real facts and bringing those facts forward. In other words, make a lot of noise, create a lot of awareness, and really help people to understand what their future will look like, that they will be looking at this stuff for 30, 35 years, maybe indefinitely, because if there are asset abandonment or stranded assets, and that is really on the horizon, that's the big concern. It should be for the counties. Who's gonna clean this stuff up? So what I suggest people do is go to every commissioner meeting, every planning meeting, work really, really hard on developing comprehensive regulations. It's extremely important to get that into your land use plan. You got to know Title 18, which is the county's portion and their authority to grant the permit. And then you need to know Title 35, and particularly what the industrial siting, their ways, rules, so on and so forth for granting permits. And then it takes really a lot of basically research, like a detective. You got to organize your facts like a research analyst, and you have to present the facts in the meeting. And you have to bring a preponderance of evidence to help shift people's mind away from the promise of money, which, look into that. It's really not there. It's not, because these projects are not sustainable. And there is an old economic precept that says, It's called Stein's Law. If the thing is not sustainable, it will end. And this will end. But the question is, what's going to be for the counties? How are they going to be on the hook? So sharing all this information with the decision makers, that would be the planning committee and the county commissioners and everybody else in the county, is extremely important. You've got to be willing to do something every single day to throw a little sand into that machine every day, because they are persistent. We have to be more persistent, more knowledgeable, ahead of it, and never, ever, ever give up.
Karen, this is Ken. Can you describe for us, they bring in a lot of concrete, a lot of rebar, they make a massive platform. And you said when these things end, what happens when they end? What sort of reclamation goes on, if any? How's that work?
Well, it's called decommissioning, and they're supposed to, in their application, they're supposed to have enough money to be able to cover that. That's in today's dollars. Who knows what that will be in 30 years from now or sooner? Because in the case of wind towers, the blades really only last in Wyoming about 6, maybe 8 years. And so right now in Wyoming, the decision is, you've seen the pictures of all the blades stacked up in Casper. Well, now the decision is to put them in mine. That's really not going to last either. I mean, there's no answer for this. If you take a look at, there's always, people don't want this.
Sure.
And there is no plan for it. So they'll tell you that they'll dispose of them, but they've got to be able to specifically say where and how, and none of this should, and that comes back to your regulations. The state's requirements for the permitting is the baseline. People need to understand that if your county offers something less than that, then that's your problem. The counties have got to have really comprehensive regulations so that it says things like, this is what decommissioning, this is what we require, with the disposal of all the either toxic panels or these non-biodegradable wind mill blades.
Yeah,
so
and
it's really about decommissioning.
Yeah, and I agree with you. I mean, there needs to be a comprehensive plan, and my opposition to, all this wind energy is twofold, really. First, I think that it's kind of a fantasy from the very beginning that one of those windmills will never pay for itself, and I mean calling it renewable energy. I mean, okay, so it's not reliable. And yeah, okay, the wind always blows, but there's really nothing green about these things. Every windmill that I've ever visited, you go to the base of it, if it's been there for a year or two, and it looks like somebody's changed their oil about 50 times right at the base of these windmills, and simply because it takes a lot of grease to lubricate those motors. And so, I mean, they're not green. They'll never pay for themselves. And the second problem I have with it is we seem to be in a place where we want to do away with a reliable source of energy, one that Wyoming has depended upon for generations, in favor of this kind of a pipe dream of creating, a huge percentage of Wyoming's energy through wind. And I just don't see I just don't see the benefit that plays out that is promised with these windmills. And so, I mean, that's kind of my opposition to it. And then the other side of it, too, is we never want to be in a position where we're discouraging private enterprise. But there again, you got to respect the property rights of everybody around. I mean, nobody wants to live next to a nuclear waste dump. I just did an episode about that yesterday. And I guess similarly, I probably don't want to live next to a giant windmill that's going to be humming all the time. I mean, there's got to be a balance there somewhere.
Well, they're not green. And the more you look into the facts, you find, 500 gallons of oil for the wind tower generators, per pop. And if they don't do it, they catch on fire. The 40,000 foot view is this. It's not about our health. It's not about our environment. It's not about any of the things that you would expect from a government that is supposed to protect people. It's about the fact that currently the Inflation Reduction Act has $300 billion of uncommitted funds, and these companies want it. It's about the money. On the way out the door of the Biden administration, they dispersed $42 billion for green energy, and that's why we're seeing that cash flow, that pump up right now. But they want that $300 billion. Meanwhile, we're $37 billion in debt. They know that the subsidies are going to end. And so they're really, really pushing hard right now. So I would encourage the people of Wyoming to push back. We've got to outlast them. Our energy costs in Wyoming over the last year have had a 7% increase. And so this is not about, so they'll say, oh, well, and I just heard this up in northeastern Wyoming, they're starting to get pressure up there. Well, this is going to reduce our energy costs. Excuse me, no. The energy, once it hits those transmission lines, it goes anywhere. And the states, California, Oregon, Washington, they have an agreement that they need to have so much green energy by a certain date. And so they're sucking up our energy, okay, so that they can be green. But what do we know about that? Well, take a look at the country of Spain. They had declared on a particular day that they were 100% green. 2 days later, they had a whole national blackout.
Yeah.
That is the truth. That is the truth. And that is what is in our future. It creates huge problems for our grid. Why don't we want more natural gas, coal? It's political, and there's a lot of money. It's the $300 billion of uncommitted funds. They are just salivating for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
that's the real truth.
Well, Karen, I've got to run, but if people want to if my listeners, viewers want to find out more information about wind turbines, this whole controversy in Southeast Wyoming, where do they go?
Well, they can do some research like I've done, but if they would like to contact me, they can reach me on my email address. And my area of specialty really is helping people to know how to fight back and be successful at it. And so my email address is karencweber@yahoo.com.
All right. Well, Karen, I appreciate you taking the time to visit with us on the program. And you're welcome back anytime. If something else happens, just let us know and we'll visit again. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You know, that's an interesting question about all these windmills. I mean, we never want to be in a situation where, you know, we're discouraging business. I mean, legitimate private business. I mean, I'm definitely pro-business, and I don't think that we should do anything to discourage that. However, on the other hand, you can't infringe on somebody else's private property rights to do it. And, you know, the research that I've done into this, part of the problem is that, you know, you have to have transmission lines, right? So, Ken, you may let them put up a windmill on your property. Well, they've got to have a transmission line to get the power from your property across mine. And, you know, I think that a lot of landowners get, I don't know, strong-armed into agreeing to it, you know, because there's always the threat of eminent domain and all that. I mean, where's the legislature at on all this? I mean, give me your thoughts.
Well, we talked about the idea of someone buying the aesthetic.
Yeah, the
views. I don't remember how the terminology
NACs.
was. But that's part of it. I've been through Medicine Bow several times over the last few months, and it's god awful. You can feel it. It's like the cumulative vibration, everything. There's no way you would want to live around that sort of thing. So while I can see both sides of that argument about the aesthetics, I would not want to look out and see those things. I remember there's also another one south of Casper, and I remember going by that in a particularly windy day, and the entire thing, you could just see the blades flexing and coming right at the highway. And I thought, I'll be glad when I'm by that, because I don't want to see it come apart. We haven't lived with these things very long, and so there are a lot of questions. And her ideas about health, the health benefits and all those others, I have strong concerns there. I have strong concerns about when all of this federal money dries up, as it will, what happens with now, how do we pay for getting rid of this stuff? And if you haven't seen the bases, I mean, they're massive.
They're huge.
And the amount of rebar and concrete and other contaminants that are out there. There's so many things that don't make sense. But to me, chief among them is they don't work. If they worked financially, capitalistically the right way, someone would be doing it without
government help.
government
I was
help.
at this is years ago, but when I was working for a construction company, but it was right in the middle of, right after 2018, the market crashed and we were just trying to find any project we could do. So, we wouldn't have to lay off people. And so I went to a bid meeting to do all the site prep for several different windmills. And I'm sitting there with my computer running the numbers. I had this giant spreadsheet, and all I'd have to do is, put numbers into it, and then it would give me the margin and the overhead and all of that, and find out if it's actually feasible for us to do it. And every single thing that I put into this spreadsheet, the number kept showing up red. And finally, I raised my hand and I said, I've been running the numbers on this, and I don't see how this is at all profitable. And the answer I got was, well, it's not without subsidies. And that, I think, therein lies part of the biggest part of it. There's lots of big part of it. This is one of them. That without subsidies, these things are not profitable. And we already know that they're not going to pay for themselves. Now, maybe sometime in the future when technology improves and, they're more efficient and we're able to, make them run without a big, gigantic barrel of oil, then maybe. But right now, I don't see that they're feasible.
There are some interesting technologies just in the shape and the design that are out there. And I see little articles pop up about, we're looking at something that's entirely different looking and works functionally perhaps much better. Wouldn't have to be 70 or 100 feet tall or however.
Right, they're huge.
We didn't even talk about all the bird killings, but there's a lot. So many things that weigh into that.
All right. Well, I think we kind of beat that one to death. So let's go ahead and take another break. And when we come back, we'll finish up the program. I've got a number of things left in the stack of stuff. So we'll go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll finish up the program. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. Wyoming's most listened to political podcast. Number 32 on the list of the top 100 podcasts, conservative podcasts you should be listening to in 2025. So anyway, my friends, back to the program. Welcome. It is July 3rd, the day before the Independence Day. And I meant to tell you this at the top of the program, but just slipped my mind, had way too much stuff to do. We're not going to do a full program tomorrow. We'll do an hour and do some Independence Day stuff. And it's been a while since we've done that. And I figured that, it's Independence Day.
Yeah.
And we can choose to work if we want to, be independent, as the case may be.
Speaking of independence, I've got one soundbite left.
All right.
That might be of interest. This is Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy Stephen Miller on the Laura Ingraham Show. Here we go.
Want to go to every Republican state. Now, of course, in a sane country, Democrats would do it too, but they love the illegals. They hate the Americans. We want every governor of a red state, and if you're watching tonight, pick up the phone, call DHS, work with us to build facilities in your state so that we can get the illegals out, we can get the criminals out. And also, very importantly, Laura, we need Congress to pass the big, beautiful bill which contains the funding that ICE desperately needs to carry out the mass deportation agenda.
Now, we reach out to other states, Stephen, and a lot of them are open to helping. Alaska told us that we don't have alligators, but we have lots of bears. However, they aren't aware of any plans for an Alaska version of bear. I said bear Alcatraz.
I think we should have a grizzly Alcatraz.
Yeah, that just got me to thinking, how would we set that up in Wyoming? We got all kinds of critters that'd be fun.
Oh, yeah, grizzlies, man. Put a facility right outside of Cody or Jackson. Either one of those will work.
Put it down in Sweetwater County and fill it with rattlesnakes.
Yeah. We've got all sorts of little animals that I'm sure any illegal immigrant would love to meet. The truth is, my friends, that none of these people are entitled to be here. If you come to our country illegally, that is, you don't have a visa, you don't have a green card, you're not trying to be a citizen, you do not deserve to be here. And I am sick to death of all of the arguments, these poor people, they're fleeing climate change. And I mean, the ridiculous narratives are endless. The fact is, if you come into this country illegally, you're a criminal. End of story.
Yeah, it would be different if we didn't have a legal way to enter the country, but we do. It's rather cumbersome, and perhaps some of those things need to be changed or altered. But that's the way you do it. But when you just decide, okay, this is a cumbersome law, it's not good, you don't just shove it aside and ignore it because you devalue all of the law. What you do is fix the law.
Exactly. And I don't see that there's really that big of a problem with the laws that we have. There isn't another country in the world that allows illegal immigration the way that the Joe Biden administration did. And now you've got, several members of Congress, the Democrat Party, just claiming that we should allow illegal immigrants into our country, regardless. And it has gotten so bad that there are several communities in Wyoming that do have illegal immigrant problems. Now, granted, okay, so there's not, a flood of them in Wyoming, but there for a while, there for like a couple months, like every other newspaper, there would be a report of an illegal immigrant that was arrested for driving without a license or breaking into ATMs or robbing cars. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous, and it was lawless. Thank God we've got the Trump administration to try to handle this. Now, earlier, oh, my voice cracked. Earlier, you played me a soundbite of talking about Robert E. Lee, and I found a piece on The Blaze this morning, and it's entitled "Don't Believe the Leftist Lies. American History is Good." And I'm just going to read most of it to you. It comes from Glenn Beck's show, but one of the things on my bucket list is to go to his museum. I'm down in Dallas. It's right next to his studio. I've been there. I've actually seen the museum, though I didn't have time to go through it. It is chock full with American history documents that people don't get to see, different items.
Yeah, his plan is to put all those documents on a website so that they can be accessed and sorted through and read, and I think that's tremendous.
Oh, I think it's absolutely incredible. And I mentioned earlier that the reason why we study history is so for two things, two reasons. One, that we don't repeat the mistakes of the past, that we learn from what we did before and say, that wasn't such a good idea. Maybe we shouldn't do that again. And the second reason why we study history is to learn how good our country is. And I'm not saying that it's just American history. I'm saying that you learn the history, wherever you happen to live at, whether you live in Spain or France France. I mean, they got a lot of questionable history there, but but you learn history to know who you are, and it's neither good nor bad. It just is. But in the case of America, it's very, very, very good.
Do you know why all the streets in France are lined with trees?
I hesitate to ask.
So that invading armies can be in the shade.
Do you know why you always buy a gun that was manufactured in France?
No.
Because it's never been used and only dropped once. All right, so don't believe the leftist lies. American history is good. And I quote, the left has fostered a culture that encourages Americans to despise this country by focusing exclusively on the darkest parts of American history, and in some cases, distorting the narrative to portray our nation and her most significant historical figures in the worst light possible. It's part of their plan to uproot the nation's foundational values and principles and install a new progressive order. For the last 25 years, all the left has talked about is the genocide of indigenous peoples, the legacy of racism and colonialism, how anti-Muslim we are, how suppression of homosexual rights, if those are actually a thing, and we have human rights, not individual and not homosexual rights, it's human rights, climate genocide, patriarchal control, how capitalism inherently generates inequality, and how the state is nothing more than a tool of class denomination. We heard a lot about that today on today's program. Among other complaints, on a never-ending list of grievances launched in the United States. Is it any wonder that recent polling has found that Democrats are willing to say they're extremely proud to be an American, that number has fallen from 87% in 2001 to 36% today. And here's a graphic of that if you want to throw this up on the screen. Let's see here, front slide. Here we go. Here's that poll, and it's from Gallup. In 2001, Democrats, 87% of those said that they are extremely proud to be an American, while Republicans are almost always way up there. But today, 24 years later, only 36% of Democrats will say that they're extremely proud to be an American. Of course, Republicans, most of us are very proud to be an American. But is it any wonder that poll had the results that it did? Conservatives, however, have largely maintained their faith in this country. They know that while mistakes have been made, some of them really, really bad and egregious, this country is still the best country in the world. You've grown up only hearing the sins, but the nation's story is not propaganda. It's proof. Yes, sometimes it's brutal. Yes, it's flawed. Yes, sometimes it's ugly. But there's also undeniable truths. And the most important being that the one country rooted in liberty reshaped the entire planet for good. And that is the lesson of American history, that a world without the United States is a very, very dark place. And we can't forget the good things that America's done. I mean, our children are inundated with propaganda about how terrible this country is and how, fill in the name of the group, that their rights are being trampled on. Well, has anybody ever thought that perhaps if we focused on the rights of everyone, that we wouldn't have such division? I mean, we talk a lot about multiculturalism on this program and how we, how there are all sorts of diverse groups that have decided to reject the idea of the melting pot and to instead focus on their own culture. I mean, that has a devastating effect on our country as a whole. And one of those being they end up with only 36% of Democrats saying that they're proud to be an American. And my friends, we got to go back and learn our history, learn who we are. And if we do that, what we'll find is that we are fundamentally a good people. And the world without America is a very, very dark place. And it's, we see this like everywhere, and you can pick any group that you want, and it's it's evident there are a lot of people that are absolutely in favor of destroying the the greatness that is America. And, if you look around this studio, and go ahead and give us the whole shot of the whole studio, Ken. I mean, there are American flags all over this place. And, we just talked, Agent 29 and I were talking yesterday about, hey, we need to have one of those appeal to heaven flags. And though you can't see it in the camera shot, there's a Gadsden flag in here. That's the one with the snake, and it says, "Don't tread on me." Oh, how white supremacist of us all. But you have to be very, very proud of the country you live in. And if we are all privileged enough to live in America, then you need to be proud of that country. And, I am. Oh, yeah, look at Ken's shirt.
Yeah, you mentioned the Gadsden. That reminded me. I always hated watching some sort of a video and somebody's wearing a T-shirt and you can't see what it says. So
Yeah. I'm guessing you're not here about the alcohol or the tobacco. Hilarious. All right, well, here's a piece for you, and this one should come as no surprise at all. Some 4th of July celebrations have been canceled in the LA area, and it's all the anti-ICE protests from Breitbart News, and I quote, "Celebrating the 4th of July is proving too dangerous for municipalities in the Los Angeles area, prompting them to cancel planned celebrations due to the concerns of enforcement actions by U.S. Customs, Immigration, and Enforcement. The fear did not impede hundreds of attending the Sick of ICE or the Sick of Trump protest in the city on Tuesday. The cancellations can only be seen as acts of protest against the Trump administration by the municipality, several of which chose to cancel previously advertised celebrations. In the city of Bell Gardens, a notice to the public on social media, on a social media platform, Instagram, advised residents that, quote, "Out of an abundance of caution regarding concerns for resident safety over federal immigration and enforcement activities, the city of Bell Gardens will be canceling the scheduled events between June 24th and July 10th. You don't think that was done on purpose, do you? You don't think that was a recreation of Barack Obama closing down the World War II memorial amid a budget dispute? Democrats always use patriotic holidays and, patriotic things in our country as political weapons because they know that the majority of Americans really are patriotic and they do love this country. But the reason why some communities in LA are canceling the July 4th celebrations is because they're using politics over patriotism. They're using politics to try to, or they're using the politics of these anti-ICE protests to try to strike a blow against President Trump. Look at what Trump has done to you. He's canceled your July 4th celebration. It's absolutely ridiculous. And, frankly, Ken, it really frustrates the crap out of me. Notice I censored myself there.
Yeah, if Trump had been born on July 4th, you could bet there'd be a celebration.
Well, there still will be a celebration. But this brings up another interesting point, and I didn't print this article out. But the 250th anniversary of Independence Day. Question. Should your tax dollars be used to celebrate that? It seems to me that a celebration of the day that we decided that taxes were bad shouldn't involve using our tax dollars to pay for said celebration. And if indeed you are celebrating Independence Day and the Declaration of Independence, then maybe, quite possibly, we shouldn't be paying with it through taxes.
Maybe what we should do is invite a tax holiday. For that particular day, all taxes are waived.
We'll call it the Boston Tea Party Day, where we reject the imposition of ridiculous taxes. And interestingly enough, we're talking about American history. Just about every school child is told that one of the main reasons why we separated from England was because of the taxes. Well, the truth is, the amount of taxes that colonists were being forced to pay amounted to about $1 per year. I mean, really, it was a tremendously low amount. But every school child is told, well, it was taxation without representation. And one of the reasons that grabbed hold was Thomas Paine. Thomas Paine was a marketing genius, and he saw that as a great phrase to rile people up, and that's what he did. The truth is, if you read the Declaration of Independence, taxes are really low on his list. Which brings up another interesting point. I challenge you, and maybe we'll do this tomorrow. I think this is a good idea. Go back and read the first draft. It's called the first draught of Thomas Jefferson's Declaration of Independence. And actually, you know what? Put this on the schedule for tomorrow. We'll definitely do this. But the biggest portion of it, the biggest paragraph in the entire thing, is I'm just going to call it a diatribe against slavery. It is absolutely amazing. I mean, it is the biggest portion of the first draft of the Declaration of Independence, and if you read it, it tells you exactly how how we felt about slavery, and it contradicts the narrative that George Washington and Thomas Jefferson and all of them, well, they're just slave owners. They're a bunch of hypocrites. Well, I mean, yeah, they were slave owners, but we have to reject the tendency to judge the past by our current feelings, our current culture. That's what I call engaging in historiography. You're rewriting history to fit the narrative of today. You have to understand historical events in the context in which they happened. And the truth is that our founding fathers were very much opposed to slavery, which kind of begs the question. Well, why then was that whole anti-slavery passage not included in the Declaration of Independence? Well, that's pretty easy because the southern states wouldn't have signed it. And it had to be unanimous. If you're going to send a piece of mail like that to the king, I mean, that was a declaration of war. It couldn't be, well, 7 out of the 13 states are in favor of seceding from Great Britain. So we have a majority. That wouldn't have worked at all. And so the thought was, okay, well, we're going to take that piece out of the Declaration of Independence and we'll get it later. I mean, that honestly was the way things went down.
It's kind of a death warrant.
Absolutely,
when
it was.
You signed that,
Absolutely.
We pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honors. Our lives.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a great Paul Harvey bit where he talks about the original signers or the signers of the Declaration of Independence. Most of them died penniless. Many of them were killed. And some of them escaped with their lives, but the vast majority of them, the English took seriously that death, the death warrant that they had signed. And I mean, it's maybe we'll play that tomorrow too. Since you're making a list, Agent 29, put the Paul Harvey thing on there, and we'll go ahead and play that during the program. I absolutely love it.
How do you spell Harvey?
Yeah, I don't know. So anyway, Declaration of Independence, it's extraordinarily important. And on tomorrow's program, we'll devote the majority of the hour to talking about that. And, and that brings up another thing. So, and I guess we'll end with this, but the museum that is supposed to be the preeminent museum in America is the Smithsonian. And, as Americans, we kind of just assume that whatever shows up in the Smithsonian is going to be fact, and that is where America stores our history. But the truth is, the Smithsonian is kind of run by a bunch of woke people still.
If you want a good museum of Smithsonian quality, and you also want to go see bighorn sheep, go to Du Bois.
Yeah, I have yet to go through that.
You've got to see it all.
I mean, I have. The last time we were there, the lovely Christine and I stopped real quick just to pick up a gift for the Master Chief, my father-in-law. And, we did stick our head in the gun vault so I could see the gun from Bunker Hill. And you walk in their gun vault, and that's the first thing that you see, the gun that fired the shot heard around the world.
So here's a guy, private funds, $100 million. He sets this up because he wants people to understand what price was paid that we can be free. And you'll never forget it.
Yeah. I mean, it's privately funded, and every single person I've talked to that's been through it has said that place is absolutely incredible. But Ken, throw up on the screen this slide here. So this is a picture from the Smithsonian, the Natural History Museum, and it's right by the dinosaur display. And if you've never been to the Natural History Museum, you absolutely have to go. It's pretty darn cool. But this whole display is about global warming. It's not about the gigantic asteroid that hit the Earth that was most likely the cause of the demise of the dinosaurs. Nope. According to the Natural History Museum, climate change. Let me give you another example, a personal one. So when the first and only time that I was in Washington, D.C., we didn't have a lot of time. We only had one day. And so my dad and I decided to go to the American History Museum. And we walk in, and there's a display about Thomas Jefferson. I was like, oh, Thomas Jefferson, he's probably number 2 on my list of the great presidents. George Washington, of course, is number 1, not because he was the first, but because George Washington was awesome. Yeah, actually, Agent 29 just pointed out on the table, got the book of Thomas Jefferson. But anyway, so we see this display, and there is the so-called lineage of Thomas Jefferson. And I'm assuming just about everybody has heard that, well, he had an affair with Sally Hemings. And there on the wall in the Smithsonian was this little line, and it says Sally Hemings, and it's got her family tree there. Well, the truth is, there's no proof that Thomas Jefferson fathered a child with Sally Hemings. And, all men should know that the way that you prove paternity is that you have to have a male heir. Thomas Jefferson didn't have any male heirs. And so there's no way to definitively prove that he had an affair with Sally Hemings. Now, the only thing they can prove is that somebody in Thomas Jefferson's family did have an affair with Sally Hemings. But we conveniently leave out the scandalous brother of Thomas Jefferson, who most likely absolutely did. Now, from a historian's perspective, do you draw a conclusion from that? Do you say, absolutely not, that didn't happen? Well, no, that would be incorrect. We have to take an open-minded approach. The only thing that we can say about that is there's no definitive proof that Thomas Jefferson fathered his child with Sally Hemings. But yet, we use that lie and tell school children all along that absolutely that happened. My friends, history is about facts. It's neither good nor bad. It just is. And unless you know the facts, well, then you're not really going to understand the amazing country that we live in. But we got to be honest about it. We have to be honest about what we did in the past and the good things that we did. Because, my friends, and this is where I'll leave the program today, the world is a much, much, much better place because America is in it. From the base of the Bighorns, at the Cowboy State Politics Studio, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics.